Awesome.
Welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much, Paolo. So I'll kick us off real quick. Hey, everyone. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to kick off with quick introductions, and then we have this 3D framework that we deploy in our course. It's called the Generative AI Products, going from idea to MVP. And we're kind of leveraging that framework today to kind of structure our content. So in the define phase, we just focus on, choosing the right problem, defining the goals for your project. And in that context, we're going to cover, what are the potential goals to leverage hybrid AI, for example? What are the right problems to be solving using this approach? We're going to jump into design and talk about some user considerations as well as a few challenges and capabilities of both Gen AI and traditional AI approaches, and then talk about some future forward considerations in the hybrid AI domain. And then we will wrap up with, exploring emerging AI tech architecture and talking about deployment. And then we leave about 15 minutes of Q&A. So hopefully that should address any of your questions, but feel free to keep chiming your questions and we can address those towards the end as well. So very quickly, my name is Rupa Chaturvedi, and I am currently the founder and CEO of the Human-Centered AI Institute. I have spent the last 20 years in the tech space. My background is product and UX design, and I worked with startups as well as large companies, most recently at Uber in the Uber Eats team. I'm also focused on helping the AI industry, especially AI practitioners and leaders, take a more human-centered approach to AI, where I provide coaching and advisory services to both startups and individuals. And I've just recently launched a new certificate program on the topic of human-centered AI deployment. I'll pass it on to Polly from here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rupa. My background is originally in technology before I transitioned into product about 10 years ago. So I was a developer before I became a product leader. But most recently in industry, I was at Amazon, where I was a part of the Alexa AI group. We deployed the very first generative AI answers in production on Alexa back in 2020. So it was an interesting step. The first time we didn't know for sure exactly what Alexa was going to say. So I've definitely seen a lot of people follow through some of the same problems and hurdles that we saw along on those projects. I now am the CEO of AI Career Boost, where I offer certificate programs and boot camps in AI product management. So do be sure to check it out there if you're looking for a more in-depth, intensive course. I wanted to kick us off we start by our definition module, right? Let's talk about what we mean when we say hybrid AI. It's part of this move from chat models to AI systems. Next slide, please, Rupa. Really, when we talk about hybrid AI, it's actually the confluence of two trends that we're seeing. So the first is really in the UX side, where there's a migration away from a lot of these chatbot initiatives and conversational UX to combining that more thoughtfully with traditional UX. So users don't necessarily want chat models for every possible interaction they might have, right? But it's also looking at combining generative AI with traditional AI. I call it AI BC, or before ChatGPT. A lot of the pre-ChatGPT, pre-generative AI models are still incredibly relevant, are actually more efficient on certain tasks. And I think as organizations are maturing, they're realizing, hey, if we can leverage best of both worlds, it may be a more complicated system, but it's often worth it to mitigate some of the risks that we're seeing introduced with generative AI. I wanted to back up, next slide, please, Rupa, and talk about how we got here. A little bit of context. So the Gen AI boom, we're all very familiar with that, but it is showing absolutely no sign of slowing down. It's actually seen a steeper initial adoption curve than many other recent technologies, including here we have the smartphone and tablets. But we have seen, next slide, please, Rupa, a little bit of negativity in that some companies are struggling to get traction, right? We definitely saw over the summer a lot of headlines asking, has the AI bubble burst? When will AI ever make money? There's been such an enormous spend into it. There's been questions, and definitely in the financial sector, about how, is it really realistic that we'll ever get the return needed to justify the amount of spending? But the key is that while some companies companies have been really struggling with the challenges that go along with implementing Gen AI systems. Others are clearly seeing return on investment, maybe not in terms of revenue yet, and this is unsurprising. A lot of companies like IBM are prioritizing business applications over consumer ones, looking at internal business systems and making themselves more efficient while developing those muscles to launch consumer products. So we're seeing expectations for revenue to really be looking forward to be much brighter than they have been as we overcome some of these challenges. Next slide, please, Rupa. So one of the key ways that companies are struggling is really, we saw that first wave of Gen AI implementation. A lot of them were top-down mandates to adopt AI. They were tech-driven initiatives based on the popularity of ChatGPT and its amazing growth. There was a lot of implementations that just focused clearly on chatbots, some kind of supposition that the success of ChatGPT indicates people want to interact with chatbots now instead of forms, instead of traditional UX. And it's also faced a lot of challenges, especially those who are not familiar with AI in general or haven't implemented AI before may have really struggled with, right? Particular to generative AI, of course, companies are still struggling with the accuracy of these models and seeing hallucinations, but there's also problems around security, that ability to simply ask the model to reveal all its secrets if you get your prompt formulation just right through prompt injection attacks. There's especially a problem too with transparency and explainability. While third party systems like OpenAI's or Anthropic's provide a huge amount of capability out of the box, there's not a lot of transparency or that ability to explain each step that is needed in some industries and desired by some users in order to gain trust. So these are just a few of the AI challenges, particularly generative AI, that companies struggle with. Next slide, please. So what really is setting the winners apart, right, is that they have focused on actual user problems and pain points, right, as opposed to top-down mandates to adopt technology. They're looking at current user flows and actually testing where does conversational AI make sense, where does traditional AI make sense in terms of the interaction. And they're also looking at saying, hey, maybe we need to build more complex systems than simply calling a third-party API, simply handing over all this complexity to an LLM. How do we marry the best of the older AI technology and what these new models bring us? And that's what we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into today. So the hybrid AI, I would describe it as it's a more nuanced or evolved approach that once companies have maybe gotten bit once with their generative AI chatbots and top-down initiatives, they're looking now at taking that user-centric approach. We'll be diving into the design and UX considerations first about like how do we combine conversational UX with traditional UX. And then on the tech side, I'll be talking a little bit more about combining more traditional AI models with generative AI and how that is being implemented in more modern system development.
It's funny, Polly, when we started this course, we were just anticipating that because of the explosive growth of ChatGPT, we'll see a lot of folks just rushing into the chatbot style interface because ChatGPT has been so successful. And that's one of the reasons we launched this course is how not to do that. And you've seen 1 year fast forward, the industry has gone through its own cycle of a roller coaster there. So super interesting to see that. So we'll just dive into the user consideration aspect and just talk a little bit about the two different approaches with some examples and then see where we are headed from a more hybrid approach. So if you look at the difference between traditional UX and any AI-enabled UX, some of the bigger distinctions in terms of user expectations are, in terms of what users expect from AI systems. And that is where experiences or products make or break is not meeting user expectations and not aligning with their mental models. So understanding of meaning and intent from users and making sure that AI has an understanding of the way user is naturally communicating to the AI is super important. Ensuring that the responses that the AI systems are providing are relevant and coherent. And in actually helping users complete the task at hand so that they feel like AI was a helpful companion and help them achieve their goals. In the ability to handle any ambiguity because it's a natural language interface, and maintaining context because the general mindset of the user is I, I expect a replication of a human to human interaction with this AI system. User trust and transparency is a huge deal, and we have seen so many recent news articles and reports recently around how some of the topics that Polly brought up in the previous slide around transparency, explainability, privacy are impacting user trust in systems, which leads to lower adoption and abandonment. And then doing it ethically, responsibly, I think we are seeing a lot more focus now in building responsible AI systems. And so these are very specific expectations and user mental models when it comes to AI systems, which could be combined with traditional experiences as well. So let's take a quick look under the hood around specific areas of Gen AI UX, where its prowess in terms of just having human-like capabilities is pretty powerful and super exciting. So having open-ended, natural conversations that replicate a human-to-human conversation, and then being able to address a broad spectrum of use cases has kind of lowered the barrier to entry from users being able to adopt AI systems and applications. And then the ability to create a co-pilot, a creative co-pilot, a companion that helps humans with creative problem solving or generating novel ideas. There were reports around the GitHub AI co-pilot being able to provide software engineers with novel ways of solving coding problems and approaches, which was pretty solid use case as well as a delightful user experience for its users. And then the ability to personalize and do it at scale to be able to adapt to certain use cases. So this is an example from Jasper.ai, where the Gen AI models that they have been trained specifically to address e-commerce and marketing use cases. And you could as an individual user also train that AI to your specific brand voice and be able to create marketing content based on that. So that's a pretty powerful capability from a user experience perspective that Gen AI is able to lend to the ecosystem. But it comes with its own challenges, and we touched upon some of these earlier when Polly was sharing the overview. One is, inconsistency of output. So it's sometimes incoherent, sometimes it's not accurate, sometimes it's just not consistent, and that just creates lack of trust and lack of consistency for the users. Deep fakes, misinformation, hallucinations. These are all, aspects that just make the user feel like the AI is not smart enough, it's not robust, it's not reliable, and it opens up a lot of questions around the broader societal impact. We talked a little bit about data privacy and security because, Gen AI opens up the risk of exposing where the sources of the data was, that it was trained on, etc. And so all of these eventually leads to abandonment and lack of adoption, but also inherently questioning the trust that users have in these systems. Now, if we take a look at the other side, where conversational AI, kind of exploded in terms of creating a more natural, human-like conversational interface, but on very specific use cases, for example, streamlining user requests and tasks. So this is Dom, the chatbot from Domino's Pizza, and it's not just helpful in terms of providing some basic information about what can Domino's Pizza offer you, but also repetitive tasks that users want to come back to over and over again. It's super reliable in those aspects, and be able to just consolidate some of these tasks and create a more human-like interface for users to be able to just ask for those tasks. This is Erica from the Bank of America. It's a very successful application for a conversational UX. Bank of America claims that they have been able to complete about 2 billion interactions using this conversational system and delivered very tangible benefits to users. And so this level of consistency and reliability for users to be able to get accurate data and information about themselves that they can trust and rely on, goes a long way in providing great user experiences, but also defining trust in the system. This is a quick demo. There's no video, there's no audio here, sorry. So feel free to take a look. But one of the core capabilities of conversational systems is the ability to break down complex tasks into small step-by-step, approaches. And that helps the user from a cognitive processing and load perspective, which is very hard to have that experience in the Gen AI space, because that gets a bit convoluted very quickly. And so users find this approach very valuable, and so are companies. Like, this is an example from Expedia, which are taking a very complex process like booking a travel itinerary and breaking it down into small steps, bite-sized approaches for the user, and being able to use a conversational system to take the user from discovery all the way to be able to make a booking in one single interface of this nature, and completely empowered by AI. But again, there are some downsides to this approach. So let's touch upon this as well. Many times conversational systems are limited in scope and flexibility. So if you end up, wanting to do a travel booking, you have to use a travel conversational system. Or if you want to do marketing, you want to use a marketing system. So it's very limited. It's trained on, certain tasks, and it's not very flexible. It's very structured. So you can only perform certain tasks. Sometimes users feel that it does not give them the complete scope of the jobs to be done. So if they want to complete a certain task, maybe the conversational system could achieve a portion of that. So think of purchasing something like a camera, and you're talking to Alexa, or you're talking to a Google Assistant to be able to research all the different cameras out there, to be able to compare and choose. It's a pretty complex process, and conversational systems are not able to handle the scope and the completeness of that task. It's hard to address complex queries. And very recently, I was working on the Uber Eats assistant, where consumers would use the conversational interface to order a meal. And imagine you are 4 people family, where 2 folks have a gluten allergy and 1 person has a shrimp allergy, and 3 out of 4 are vegans, and then you want to find a meal like that. And so it becomes very hard, and that's where we had to bring in some Gen AI capabilities in the backend to be able to let users to provide some complex queries on what type of meals they're looking for. Also, conversational systems have limited ability to adapt and learn in real time. They need a lot of human in the loop and manual intervention. And eventually that leads to similar challenges, which include frustration, incomplete, task, and not fulfilling the user needs, and potentially abandonment. So you're seeing that 2 different, deep dives into 2 different AI systems, which both have their great capabilities, but also some challenges that, if taken on its own, feels like they result into similar issues around user adoption, trust, and frustration. So that opens up the door to, okay, so where could we go from here if we have continued challenges in each individual system? The world is opening up to a more hybrid approach, where from a user experience perspective, being able to seamlessly transition between a more open-ended, like a conversational system, to a more structured interaction, right? That seems like a great breakthrough in terms of building an AI interface, or the ability to handle creative and factual queries at the same time, to be able to enhance personalization, but still maintain the accuracy, and potentially doing it in a responsible way. And there's a lot of speculation around what the future of user interfaces looks like. It's hyper adaptive and hyper dynamic. You can check out this very cool tool I was playing around with yesterday called Replica. It's basically creating a digital version of yourself, and it touches upon several different use cases, and is already showing us the promise of a more hybrid approach. But very quickly, I want to double click on this tool called Notebook LM. And thanks, Polly, for pointing me towards it. It's a note-taking / research assistant type of a system, but you can see the interface. It has a combination of both the ability to handle complex data queries like a traditional text system, but also the ability to do synthesis and summarization using Gen AI prowess, but at the same time, a conversational system to be able to have a human-like conversation and fine-tune the work or being able to ask questions in a conversational way. So it's kind of taking multiple approaches and combining it into a cohesive experience. From a user perspective, we used to have this saying that don't ship your org chart. And I think the same concept applies here, where they don't care about which AI tech you're shipping. They want to be able to get the benefit out of the AI capability. And so, it doesn't matter, what they're interacting with, as long as it helps them achieve the task that they want to, and they can do it in a reliable, trustworthy way. So these are some emerging examples. We have a few more case studies, but, I'll just point you to the course where we go much deeper into this space. And users are finding this super exciting, where they are able to, irrespective of what tech is being used in behind the scenes, they are able to complete tasks. They are able to switch seamlessly from one modality to another. And I think that's a more exciting future for AI based user experiences.
Rupa, on that notebook LM example, what I love about their UX, if you go and explore it, is that it's that first taste I've seen concretely. It's almost like Lego blocks, right? Each of these different pieces. So whether something is a conversational block or this is a summary of your document, you have a set of commands where you can generate FAQs or a study guide based on a document. But it clearly suggests that potentially over time they could improve this UX so that it adapts to the user, whatever the user is using most for a particular document. And I think that's that trend too, that hybrid UX is also enabling a more adaptive and personalized UX. I think we'll see both of these two trends growing, and you'll need to understand what that means for your products.
Absolutely. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Polly.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the technology that's driving things and the new emerging tech approaches for hybrid AI. So when the large language model chatbot model first emerged, a lot of companies were doing something along these lines, where basically they would say, we're using an Alexa example here, what time is it in Santiago? And they're trying to figure out, how do I get it to the model to answer the correct way? We'll give it some instructions about the personality of the chatbot. We'll give it instructions about the length and the kind of answers to give. But there was a lot of focus on trying to train these models to understand our data or be correct, be up to date. And largely, this was completely a black box of what was going on in behind the system. So those limitations we talked about before with transparency and explainability. But there was also people really struggled to adapt this to their own content. Then, of course, the next thing that has emerged and is now by far the #1 most implemented kind of architecture or design choice for systems is called RAG, if you haven't heard of it, a retrieval augmented generation. And I've always hated this term because it sounds very technical when really it's very simple. I always work backwards. It's still generation using an LLM, but the query or the prompt is augmented with data you have retrieved from some external system. But you'll see already there's not just one step of calling it and getting the answer back. The user is providing a prompt, and a system that you have to design and build is then using retrieval to get content data, whether it's from a vector database, feature stores, et cetera, external content, and then adding that, just the content that's needed for the user query, to pass to the LLM. And this is definitely more efficient. We've seen it definitely reduce hallucinations in a lot of cases. And of course, people can hook this up specifically to their customer service FAQs, to their content, and instruct the LLM to only answer from the content that they're passing it in the prompt. This is a very simplified version. There are a million very fancy flavors of this, but at its core, this is really what's going on behind the scenes in a RAG system. So the key the key thing that's driving the hybrid approaches, where we're looking at getting the best from old technology and the best from new, is really this problem. We were very familiar with this at Alexa, where we had what we call head queries, right? 60 to 80% of common requests, they don't actually require creativity or understanding to interpret, and we want them to be consistent, like rules-based answers, or perhaps it's something like, issue me a refund. Like, we don't want to get creative about how we're doing this. We want this to be done in a particular way. And then we have another 20 to 40 more diverse and creative queries that maybe we want to handle with our own updated information. If a new set of queries emerges because of an external event, we want to be able to handle those elegantly too, right? And not just say, sorry, I can't handle that. So how do we handle both? And that's really where these more complex systems that can dynamically switch between more traditional chatbot design using natural language understanding and intent classification, and these more LLM approaches augmented with our own data. I've got a quick diagram of how that might work in practice, right? So in a lot of these like intent, right, which is more traditional, and RAG hybrid architecture, you might decide your refund policy, and to process a refund, those are defined areas that you might want to use what was the way we used to develop chatbots to actually issue specific answers, right, or specific commands behind the scenes. But then anything else could go to these RAG systems where you can have your documents and you can decide which of the different RAG templates or prompts you want to use to answer, coming back to the UI layer. But behind the scenes, that deciding between defined topics and RAG topics, that's still a classification system, using traditional UI, UX, as opposed to relying on LLMs across the board, simply because that's the tool that we have, right? And this is also helping companies not only get, consistent and correct answers and behavior for the highest priority use cases, but it's also helping them be efficient in terms of costs, in terms of being able to cache answers, et cetera. So if all of that was gobbledygook to you, please don't worry. We go much deeper into the tech stacks and actually look at some of the no-code tools that you can either implement an MVP or at least use for your own learning as part of our course. So we are kicking off on October 4th. It's just a 3-week course where we have 3 modules: define, design, deploy. And we've given you just a quick taste today of what we're looking at in each of these. We do have limited seats, so we encourage you to register as soon as possible.
And this will also be our last cohort for 2024.
That's
So I
right,
encourage you
exactly. I
to,
can't believe we're thinking about the end of the year already, but here we are. It is the last chance to get in. It has been rave reviewed and one of the most popular courses on Reforge. And it's a nice way to get up to date quickly about sort of what's happening in industry right now, even if you come from zero background in tech or in AI.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, we'd love to pass it off to questions now.
All right, so we've got a few questions that have already been submitted by folks, and currently the most upvoted one is to get your perspective on some big industry changes. So a few weeks ago, the Klarna CEO made a statement saying that they're going to be shutting down their SaaS vendors like Salesforce and Workday because they're building their own internal AI tools to handle this. Do you feel that this is a one-off or the beginning of a trend?
I have thoughts, Rupa. Do you have anything to add here?
I personally, this is my personal opinion. I do believe this is a beginning of a trend. We have seen, several companies, and when Polly was talking about the ROI, I was going to chime in there saying a lot of these companies are seeing tremendous benefits with internal optimization. And so we will start seeing Gen AI again, think of Lego blocks being cobbled up together to deliver some significant business results.
I completely agree. I think it's a trend as well. When you think about the kind of degree of personalization you could have by building your own internal SaaS tools for these functions, right? It's something that no one platform is going to be able to deliver for everyone unless they are also going to be like completely AI first and allow that degree of customization. But think of it as the ability to now create your own tools, even as individuals, is so much more achievable now than it was even a year ago. The part of our course is really showing you how, using no-code tools, you can very quickly create prototypes or even really valuable solutions using no-code tools. And even coding is becoming increasingly accessible to people who are willing to spend some time playing around to build an app. Some of this generative AI can build apps within 10 minutes. Wouldn't you rather build something completely customized internally to your exact needs and your customers' needs, as opposed to relying on a SaaS tool? And a lot of companies, I think, are going to go that way.
Great. So now we have a question from Patrick, specifically around e-commerce websites, like the Expedia example you've shown. So websites like Expedia have improved their booking funnel over the years, and now you're integrating AI chats where you can do everything in chat without any UI. But Patrick points out sometimes it's much better to see a real website with pictures and visualizations for something like booking on Expedia. So would you say it's a better approach to guide the user through the website with the chat and still highlight sections of the website? Or do you think a different approach, like seeing 30 different options as a list in a chat instead of an overview of the page? And what do you think of that?
This is such a great question.
Totally.
I'm going to dive in and then feel free to chime in. I think there are limitations to both approaches on its own as a standalone, right? There are limitations to how we do travel booking with traditional UXs and traditional systems versus doing it through chatbot. And there are definitely some incremental value of being able to form a complex query. If you look at if you just Google up booking.com, you will see some of their videos and their demos as well, which talk about how users are able to type in things like, I want to find a location that's less touristy. Now that's very hard to do with traditional UXs. So AI can actually understand what do you mean by the word touristy, or you want to find places that are close to a beach or things like that. These are just easier done in a conversational way. So the future I envision is more like a co-pilot kind of a model where your traditional website is supported by an AI enabled co-pilot, and you're able to manipulate the existing UX using a conversational mechanism of interacting with the co-pilot. So you get the best of both worlds. And that's a trend I'm hoping to see more and more of, as the user gets the benefit of a more large screen visual browsing experience, but they at the same time the manipulating of that data is done in a very natural way that feels very intuitive to the user.
Yeah, I love this proposal of like that integrated chat kind of guiding you through the site. What we had definitely found at Amazon and Alexa was it's so dependent on where the user is in their buying journey. So if they're early stage, like help me decide what shoes to buy for rainy weather or something, like a really open-ended query. What's the best tents for camping in the Pacific Northwest, right? That is such a different thing than like reorder the coffee I got last time. Those are like the two ends of the spectrum, right? And the UX needs to be completely different for those. So I think the trend is towards experimentation about how to integrate these, but it's also not going to be one size fits all for your shopping needs, right? It's going to definitely be, sometimes you're there to kind of build a mental model of what's available. And if you just get one recommendation for the best shoes for running in the rain, you might feel a lot of FOMO. What else was I missing? Is it taking into consideration XYZ? Sometimes you purposely want to explore and do discovery. Sometimes you're there to get a job done. Or as Jenny Weiss points out, like sometimes you're at a site to just find the phone number, right? You don't necessarily, if that's like a main use case of your website, you don't want to necessarily chat with a chatbot to go find it. You don't want to build a mental model of how their website is laid out unless you're going back to that website all the time and need to know what else is there, right? So it's really important to consider like exactly where the user is in their journey and what they're trying to get out of the interaction.
Context is so important, right? And if you folks want to check out Rufus, which is Amazon's recent LLM-based experience, I think one of the nice things about that experience, there are lots of downsides, but one of the positive aspects of that experience is how contextual it is. It knows that you're on a product detail page, and so you might want to ask questions about the product. It knows that you're on the search page, so you might still be looking at fine-tuning your search. And I think that maintaining that context is key to creating a good experience.
All right, we've got another question here, which is about the classic buy versus build decision. So how many companies have the skills to truly build scalable solutions versus purchase? Because it takes time to build scalable solutions and the complexity is staggering. So should companies be investing now to build in this AI muscle?
I think they should be. So, and I think it depends. I think it's not accurate to say everyone needs to be building foundation models and investing that in that kind of, kind of expense. And I think the one mistake I do see people doing is not investing in building the muscles that they will need in the AI era. So it can begin with, we're using, one third-party API like Gemini or OpenAI's models, Anthropic's models. Like, let's pick one to start with, and let's make sure we can try it with different data sources at scale. We've got data controls in place for understanding data governance. We can get get teams different versions of the data as they need it. Like, let's go through this once and early to make sure we understand the process. But then quickly, we need to be able to build the muscles to quickly swap out models or be able to regression test if a new model comes out that's supposedly better. How quickly can we adapt to it? How quickly can we retrain with any fine tuning that we've done, right? So I think companies do need to be investing now. I just don't think that they're necessarily on a multi-billion-dollar journey, depending on their size, right? I think that can be intimidating, and they don't need to learn it all, right? They don't need to necessarily know all the details of how to actually, get masses of web data in order to build their own LLMs, for example, right? The key is, and this is why so many people have done it, starting with internal use cases, starting small, so that the complexity isn't overwhelming and that you're really focused on the learnings you need to deliver value in your organization or to your customers.
So on the note of delivering value, Olivia wants to know, how do you think about measuring the impact and efficacy of AI features, especially when they're integrated into this hybrid approach?
That's a great question. And we do touch on evaluation as part of the course as well. I think it's a lot of it is really simple. It's like, does this save the user features? Sorry, internal. Does it save users time? Does it save them money? Like, what's that benefit? The business impact is still the end quantification of this, right? And I do think a lot of the current AI tools out there kind of struggle just because they were like, well, we put AI on the label and people asked for it, but we haven't actually defined what user benefit this is going to deliver. ChatGPT is clearly saving people time, providing convenience for a lot of different tasks, right? And that's where you get people talking about all the different things that they do with it. It isn't just necessarily time, it might be certainty, right? In a decision, I'm coming to a decision more quickly with a thought partner, et cetera. So I think the business metrics are the ones that need the first and foremost attention of, like, what are we trying to drive up and to the right in terms of impact. And efficacy is, again, that notion of, is it doing it efficiently in terms of time and in terms of internal costs? What we're looking for is those use cases that deliver 10x the benefits. And then we can look at, okay, now how do we get efficient with this and drive the costs down? A lot of companies are trying out use cases with these third-party models. It's working, it's providing an amazing 10x lift on a use case, but now it's very expensive. So do we look at switching to open source and taking some of the costs of running these LLM systems in-house, for example?
On the topic of use cases, Kamlesh wants to know, what are the enterprise use cases fetching the biggest and fastest value from generative AI?
I'd say number one, we clearly have a lot of people who immediately were looking at chatbots for customer support, right? That was a big one. Clearly, the marketing and creative side of the house has been using this to 10x their productivity there. And then the other piece I would say is internal, like anything to do with needing to munge paperwork from A to B, any kind of internal processes. I would say those would be the biggest quick wins. Rupa, did you have any other examples?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of customer support, like, back-end stuff there, where there's knowledge retrieval, information about policies, how-tos, things like that. We're also seeing a lot of enablement. So you want to enable your sales organization, for example, or you want to enable your marketing outfit. So those are examples. And then lastly, I would say just reducing time to market. So there are lots of examples recently, including Amazon, where getting some augmented coding support using AI has been, one of the up and coming use cases as well.
I did want to mention too, I saw someone had asked a question about how we keep our course up to date. Both Rupa and I are teaching full time, so we do this professionally to stay up to date. I'd encourage you to follow both of us on LinkedIn. I try to definitely post regularly about updates specifically for products. So I'm definitely a product and business side, so I take a lot of technical innovations and try to translate what that means for product people. We'd love to see you following us there, and it's also what we're trying to do in our course. But we do our very best to keep it up to date for each session.
And I responded to that saying this session is a great example of that. We observed some up and coming trends, and we have already incorporated those. And so we try and, we've iterated the course several times since we started teaching it last year. And that's a real deal for us, is just keeping up. The space is so fast paced and so crazily evolving that it is definitely a real challenge, but we do our best to keep up and keep updating the course as we speak.
It's the fun part.
If you say so, Polly.
Great. On that note, I know you've got your course coming up on October 4th, and we'll be sending out the recording of this webinar as well as the slides to everybody. And with that, thank you so much, Polly and Rupa, for this really interesting talk today.